Okay, we do have a quorum with one missing member, Ms. Florine Phillips. Please let the record show she is absent tonight. We've all had an opportunity to look at the minutes, maybe briefly. They were delivered to us late this afternoon. Has anyone noted any errors or objections they would like to bring forth?
There was a couple of typos, but Barbara and I have already talked. It doesn't change the content. We looked it over, but she's going to fix those.
Great. Chair will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes with the correction of the typos mentioned by Ms. Walhart.
I move that we approve the minutes once the corrections are made.
I second motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve after the corrections have been made. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. First item of business is a public hearing for the sketch plan of parcel ID number SC 160008 and parcel ID SC 130043. This is the Oak Grove Farm. It's a revised plan that we saw last month. We held a public hearing on the rezoning of the property. There was a list of conditions. It was a recommendation to the City Council to approve the rezoning. It was not a unanimous recommendation, but it was a recommendation to approve with a list of conditions, and I do believe the Mayor and Council has tabled that in order to come back and let the Planning Commission have a public hearing on the revised sketch plan. I will note that the sketch plan as presented or as shown, that will be shown by staff and the applicant, while they did make I noticed some significant changes to the entry, some of the concerns that we noted last month about accessibility have appeared to be addressed, or an attempt to address those concerns. The zoning still in place is not the zoning that we recommended approval. Therefore, the sketch plan as presented, because the council did not approve the rezoning as we recommended, the sketch plan cannot go forward under the current zoning that's there. So should this Planning Commission be so inclined to recommend approval of the sketch plan, if there's no concerns or considerations that you have or the public that would make you have pause, that you do so contingent upon or conditioned to the City Council actually approving the zoning. As it stands now, this sketch plan, as stated, would not be allowed under the current zoning. So just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, as you're looking this over and hearing the facts of the case and hearing the public. With that said, Barbara, would you like to introduce the item and kind of give a brief staff report of the sketch plan as presented?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Everyone? Okay, you have it before you, application for the Oak Grove Farm revised plan and conditions. This is an application by the Pacific Group to subdivide SC 160008 and SC 130043 for single-family homes. The property is located below on your map as shown, and it's highlighted in the blue. The surrounding properties are zoned RMD to the west and south. The South Walton Ballpark, zoned office institutional, is located to the north. The properties to the east are zoned agricultural, and the adjacent property to the south is zoned I-1 heavy industrial, includes the Social Circle Theater, the Masonic Lodge, and Standridge Industries. The area of the zoning map is provided on the screen. We do have a letter of intent from the applicant with a minimum dwelling unit size of 1,600 square feet is specified, with additional requirements for 10,000 square foot lots and at least 25% of the 6,000 square foot lots. The application also includes a proposed HOA amenity area to include a clubhouse, swimming pool, and tennis courts. The existing cemetery is shown to remain in an open space area and access from the proposed public road and a parking area. The stormwater management is proposed at the eastern end of the property in a larger open space area where the existing streams are located. The roadway plan is included in the application package. At build-out, the proposal includes an access from Oak Drive and an access from Fairplay at Ronthor. The roadway plan, when complete, results in 5 cul-de-sacs which appear to meet the city subdivision ordinance length maximum of 720 feet for the RMD district. The subdivision application does include a phasing proposal under which the first phase would have access only to Oak Drive. The through road connection to Fairplay would be installed in the second phase as proposed. Under this approach, the first phase would essentially be a cul-de-sac. The Planning Commission may wish to consider the maximum number of homes served by one entrance and the maximum cul-de-sac length that is advisable in any phase. A traffic study was prepared by the applicant and submitted, and I did leave, it was presented last month on the day of the Planning Commission. But it is attached in your package that you received this time. The water and sewer system master plans provide guidance on the future expansion for this infrastructure. The application is generally consistent with these master plans, and the city respective consultants have reviewed the application for comment in this regard. And this is just a note from that we subsequent in the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant submitted a revised listing of the conditions, which included the conditions the Planning Commission asked for and the applicant agreed to at the Planning Commission public hearing last month. In addition, the applicant submitted a revised concept plan, the sketch plan that you have before you tonight, to respond to the Planning Commission concerns about the Oak Grove entrance. This revised plan provides a roundabout at the Oak Grove entrance wholly within the subject property and does not impact any adjacent properties. The advised plan has been reviewed by the city, Public Works, Police, Fire, and the city engineering consultant Precision Planning. The revision was noted by each to improve traffic conditions.
Thank you, Barbara.
And we do have the list of the conditions in your package.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. At this time, are there any questions of Barbara about the staff report or the request that she explained? If not, I'll call Mr. Seifert to give his brief presentation on the proposed sketch plan.
Good evening. Last month, you voted to table our sketch plat application so that we could come up with a proposed plan for the improvements to our entrance on Oak Drive, as Barbara described. Due to the nature of the existing intersection with Oak Drive, Willow Drive, and Holly Street, we ultimately submitted a comprehensive solution to the entire intersection and frontage of our proposed development. I believe each of you received a full-size copy of those proposed improvements. By nature of the design, the roundabouts, or any roundabout for that matter, provides traffic safety, decrease in vehicle delays, and provides the traffic calming effect. The staff did confirm, I think as she just mentioned, that there was all positive feedback on this access proposal from police, fire, and the city's engineer. And since we went through the full presentation last week, I will spare you all going through those same points again. But before we reserve the rest of our time to answer any questions, I did want to touch on a few points that have been asked to us over the past couple weeks. And I'll just list them real quick. Number one, our average square footage for the proposed 275 lots is 9,632 square feet, which is above the required minimum average of 8,700 square feet. Number two, we do have adequate water pressure modeled for the full build-out. And as we discussed at the last meeting, we also went through all the sewer improvements that we'll be making to the sewer system. Number three, as it relates to the school system. I did mention last week, but we've worked with Dr. Hooker and discussed our willingness to contribute to the school system beyond the added tax base that this community would naturally bring. While this hearing is just about the sketch plat tonight, and we'll bring this back up with City Council when we're heard in November, we are willing to make one more additional condition to contribute $500 per recorded lot directly to the school system, which was not in the list of conditions that y'all actually recommended approval with. So we want to, obviously, or we know that we're investing in road infrastructure, sewer, water, gas, and now in the school system. And we hope this additional contribution to the school system shows our willingness and desire to work with the community in every angle that we can as we work through this zoning process. Number 4, we have communicated with both Comcast and AT&T, and AT&T for sure, at a minimum, probably both, but AT&T is committed to bringing fiber to our community. Again, these are some items that have just been brought up, maybe not directly from this commission, but even from residents. 5, the Crawley-Gibbs Cemetery that we've proposed that we'll be improving the access with paved roads, and we'll have parking once Phase 1 is complete. But we wanted to acknowledge that we're happy and would invite any discussion with family members of those who may rest in the cemetery so that we could just further coordinate ongoing maintenance as this project moves forward, assuming it does. Number 6, the price point of the homes. They'll be starting in the low to mid 200s. We wouldn't be able to start any lower just simply because of the cost of land and development and the minimum architectural conditions that we've established in our proposed conditions. We would anticipate the average sales price will be probably in the mid to high 200,000s, and not wanting to call it any certain communities, but our conditions would promote a quality of construction that is higher than the level of some suggested that they fear it could be. And I think happy to go through individually how those conditions help move from to a higher quality construction than what some are concerned about, if anybody wants to go through those. But I think the conditions speak for themselves, hopefully, on that. And then finally, our preliminary grading plan confirms that we can develop the site and install all necessary infrastructure without impacting any wetlands or state waters. We actually would have one creek crossing, so when I say state buffers, we would have one perpendicular crossing, and we'd be exempt from a buffer variance for that crossing. But as it relates directly to the Army Corps of Engineers, because we would be using an arch culvert to span that creek crossing, we wouldn't have to submit a PCN to the Corps. We would be staying out of those state waters of which the Corps governs. Also, we just wanted to clarify that at no point will any home building pad be at or below the 100-year floodplain elevation. And I think this goes, just generally speaking, as the current standards require, this development would not create any flooding concerns. And short of getting into any details or into the weeds of that, which we can, Ralph Davia with Graydon Engineering is with us tonight. He's our civil design engineer. And then Kim Metcalf with Riverbend Environmental is our environmental consultant. And she and her firm delineated the site to identify any wetlands and state waters on site, which helps us establish if and where we have buffers that Ralph then utilizes in his design. So both are here tonight, just in case anybody wants to ask a specific question to either of them too. One last thing I'll say is I know that there's a proposed amendment to the ordinance regarding number of required entrances to any residential subdivision based on the number of lots that that subdivision may have, and it's a tiered process where you can get up to a third required entrance. And I know that we happen to be on an agenda, and I don't know when that's going to come before each board and the council. But if it were to be a item of concern, we're happy to accommodate with yet another additional condition if y'all see it needed. If you were to recommend approval, that it be conditioned that if that ordinance is passed, we would be required to provide that third point of access for fire safety. We would be agreeable to that condition. Hopefully you agree that the proposed entrance plan is a great solution and that you find it that you can vote to recommend approval on the sketch plat tonight. And we're happy to discuss anything else if anybody has questions or concerns.
Mr. Seifert, I want to say you have about 2 minutes of rebuttal, but I do want to ask about if anyone here has any questions of him at this time, I have a couple of questions about the revised entry, but does anyone on the planning commission have any questions of the applicant at this time?
I'm not sure if this is for the applicant, but I have read through the traffic impact study, and am I correct in assuming that all improvements for traffic flow will take place on, at least the first phase, will take place on the property of the subdivision? There are no plans at this time to widen East Willow?
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions of the applicant at this time? I would like to ask, Mr. Sievert, I'd like to say thank you for making the concerted effort to come back and look at the entrance. I did ask the city manager about this revised entrance, about it. There's been discussions. She did say yes as far as with the city engineer looking at it. I know she's got an engineering background. She looked at it. And obviously, this is your proposed plan, so this is going to be your cost. One thing that the city council will have to do is, with this proposal, is obviously make an abandonment of a particular piece of roadway. That's for the city council to decide. And I hope I was clear earlier when I introduced the item that the sketch plan, as it stands, since the property is not zoned, it has the underlying zoning, it has not been rezoned yet, city council does not take action, that if this body were to make a recommendation to approve, it would have to be followed with contingent upon rezoning. Was that did you understand that?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I think, to your point, I think you said, while y'all could recommend approval on the sketch plat, it's conditioned
Upon the rezoning.
if the council were to approve the rezoning.
That's correct.
Then they would follow through with using your recommendation towards the sketch plat review.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so in looking at the tax assessor's information we have, where you can see kind of the land around this lot, I don't see where a third entrance really would be feasible. Just looking at that, looking at the map of all the other lying properties. I mean, have you talked to anybody about that around the area, or talked to the city about what the possibility for a third entrance would be?
If I may, Jay,
Sure.
Yep.
I looked at that as well. Even before he offered the idea of a condition of a third entrance. Looking at how, and I'm certainly not the expert in this, but I would think looking at how the application has followed and how the application flows, I believe that this application would be in prior to any ordinance amendment adopted by council that would require
That
a
makes
set
sense.
number of entrances. That's just my opinion now. I'm not an attorney or you don't play one on TV, but that might be one that may be a non-starter. But
That
I
makes
looked
sense.
at that last month and thought, well, there's 275 houses on two entrances. How can we alleviate that? And given the proximity and how the property is situated,
But just, all I'm thinking is that, in the event that is the case that has to occur,
yeah.
I think it'd be important to know exactly what the options may be relative to that, regardless of whether it ends up being a problem or not.
Well, and I think in that regard, we want to settle any, we understand the dynamic there. Cherry Street, which I think if everyone knows where that falls, currently actually provides access to the cemetery. It's via what I would just call a beaten down path once you get off the pavement of Cherry Street. But so that corner of the property, we have access to public right-of-way. I think from our perspective, out of respect for the residents who live on Cherry Street, we didn't want to propose it to have that access, because I think they would, not speaking for all of them, but we would guess they wouldn't want that access necessarily.
It's pretty tight looking.
However, even additionally to just straight to Cherry Street, which we would have the access to the right-of-way, there's actually recorded right-of-way that then runs down alongside both ends of Cherry Street and Boxwood all the way to Oak Drive. So I think there's effectively a couple different paths from that same corner that we have the access to and can provide that third entrance, should that be deemed something that either this board or eventually the council would want to propose as a condition.
All right, thank you.
And again, we're not proposing it out of respect to those who live there, but it's possible, and we would be willing. Speaking to one of the neighbors.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Seifert at this time? Thank you, sir. You have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay.
Now, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here besides the applicant that would like to speak in favor of this request? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Angela Porter, and I reside on Boxwood, and I don't know how you could get through Boxwood. I live on the dead end of Boxwood, which my property was purchased, and there's just a little bit of space to get between Cherry Street and Oak, from Cherry to Boxwood Oak. That is not a feasible solution. It's not gonna work, because I own that property. And it's not a, I'm sorry, I was
That's okay.
supposed to address you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not enough space to get through there.
Sure.
So, my other concern was, we were talking about, and I'm sorry, because this thing is,
It is terrible. It's fogging up your glasses.
it is, and I have to keep it on because I have every underlying condition. But we were talking about widening the roads. Now, what was spoke of the applicant is that he's not going to consider widening the roads until I guess during the process of doing the project. I don't know how that's going to work coming off of Oak, Willow, as well as he had spoke of widening, what's that, Runther to Fairplay up to Annie P. Henderson. But that's gonna be delayed until the subdivision is worked on. Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't think there's a discussion of widening Fairplay to Ronthor, but I could be mistaken, Ms. Porter.
There
We'll-
was in the information that was sent to me, and I left my package at home by mistake and rushed to get here. But there was conversation about widening the roads from Ronthor, the roundabout, Ronthor coming up to Annie P. Henderson.
Yes, ma'am.
But coming through Boxwood from Cherry, that's not an option.
Understand. And I think the applicant understands that as well. And given the respect for the residents who live on Boxwood and Cherry, that's not the most ideal situation.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the sketch plan application? Yes, ma'am. Would you like to come to the podium, please? Yes, please. Yeah, podium, microphone, the stick.
Reading over the information that they sent us,
Ma'am, can you state your name, please?
Pat Preston.
Thank
I
you.
own the property adjacent to this on the east side,
Okay, thank you.
okay? I downloaded from the city. In one place it says 272 lots, in other places it said 292. Exactly what is it?
I'm sorry, one place, ma'am, you said
One place on what I downloaded from the city
yes, ma'am.
said 272.
Okay.
Another place in the same thing said 292. So is that a typo?
Yes, ma'am. The maximum lot count would be 275.
Oh, so
that's
it's
the
neither
maximum.
one of those, okay. All right, one question was, I thought if you're asking for rezoning, anywhere that property touches a street, there has to be a sign saying rezoning. Is that correct or incorrect?
The property has to be posted in a conspicuous place per the zoning procedures law. The city may have a specific ordinance that states where the postings have to be. Typically, the postings will be placed upon the road frontage of the street for any passing motorist to see that there's a public hearing.
Well, there was not one on Fairplay Drive.
Okay.
So, I mean, is that a problem with anyone?
Well, I believe
Isn't it
that
against the rules, though?
that would be a problem because there was not adequate notification. I did not drive down Fairplay Drive. I cannot verify.
Oh, well,
That's
I
something
can.
that
I
would
do
have
every
to
day.
that would have to be addressed by staff.
Okay. My other question is, it said there would be 25% rental property.
I believe they have proposed to put a cap, work with the HOA and establish a covenant that would allow no more than 25% of the homes to be rental.
And no one has a problem with that? And not be just owner occupied?
Well,
Because sometimes that leads to problems.
Well, I think it's a good effort to try to cap the rental. I think the HOA will probably find trouble with trying to enforce that. We certainly don't want to prohibit people from renting their property. They may be in a situation where they own it and have to move out of town, and either it's not a good time to sell it or they want to keep it and have it as a rental income.
Okay, I don't quite agree, but that's okay. So, I guess that's everything.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
You're so welcome.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to this request? Hearing none, we'll close the, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
I guess I'm neither for it or against it. That is my family's cemetery that's there, and that's my main concern. I realize that when you have land and it can possibly be developed and houses built, that an owner of the land would possibly want to do that. But as I said, my main concern is my cemetery. I have talked with Barbara at the City Hall, and she showed me some of the plans. I did not know about the sale or anything until I was over at the cemetery one day, and I saw stakes in the ground with flags. So I'm not that well informed on the whole thing yet, but that's why I'm here tonight. And Barbara showed me where the cemetery would be kept separate, and I'd like to maybe tonight talk to you all about it. But it is, of course, what goes without saying, I guess, a very special place to us. My family owned that land since the 1820s, and there are numbers over there. Well, all those people are early citizens of Social Circle. I don't want to get lengthy, but my great-great-great-grandfather and his wife are buried there. He was one of the founders of the Masonic Lodge. He and his wife, Martha, were two of the 7 people who founded the Baptist Church. He was also the first landowner here in town to give right-of-way to the railroad. So I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my little cemetery over there. And all these years, my daddy kept it up, and I continue to do so. And we visit it often, and it will make me happy to know that it will continue to be where we can get to and visit. And again, I would like to meet you all and talk with you tonight. And That's all. Thank you.
Ma'am, for the record, can you state your name, please?
I'm sorry. I should have done that to start with.
That's okay.
A little nervous. Mary Lynn Reinagel, and I was a Gibbs
Okay.
before I married, and the cemetery is the Crawley Gibbs Cemetery.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are about 25 graves over there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for hearing me.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? There's roughly 2 minutes and 20 seconds remaining. And ma'am, to address your concerns of the cemetery, being that is a cemetery there, no matter what happens with the property, whether this applicant or a future applicant, that cemetery access would have to be provided to the family to continue to care for and look after that and come and visit their ones that are resting. So that's could be some good news for you, maybe give you a little bit of relief. Mr. Seifert, if you'd like to come up and address any of the concerns, like I said, you have 2 minutes of rebuttal.
Yeah, just to reiterate, we definitely will meet, discuss, and look forward to working through and making sure that we have a coordinated effort to provide the access and how it would be maintained and so forth. So we'll definitely get together tonight and continue to talk.
Okay.
And other than that, again, just if there's any other questions,
Okay.
happy to answer.
Thank you, sir. Barbara, I'd like to ask you a question regarding the public notice signs. Ms. Preston brought it to our attention that there was not a sign at Fair Play.
Yes, sir, we put one at Fair Play and one at Oak. You don't see it from Willow, but if you turn up Oak, there's one. And there was one on Fair Play, right at the, right across from Ronther.
Yes,
right
ma'am.
there, because it's the old, well, it's the property owned by IMAC. It's
Okay.
just right across the street. It was one sitting there. I have not went up there in a couple of weeks. When we first heard this last month, we changed the dates.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know we pulled it up one time and went back, changed the dates for mayor and council, and then we changed the dates for this one.
Okay.
So it's been changed a couple of times, but like I said, I haven't went up there and actually verified it was still there.
Okay. Thank
But I
you.
know the one on Oak today, I rode by it, it was there. But the one on Fair Play, I won't guarantee it was still there.
Okay.
Or-
And to clarify, were there any previous discussions about the widening of Fair Play to Ronthor at one point, or Annie P. Henderson?
I have not heard of anything, or I have not read anything in what I've read.
Okay.
I don't think there was
Okay.
any discussion on widening the roads.
Nothing at the staff and city level. There may have been
Yes.
some discussion outside of that, but not.
Might have been, away from staff, but it wasn't here
Okay.
with us.
Okay.
No,
Thank
I think the discussion and that is in the packet is related, I believe, to the future roundabout
Yes,
or a
ma'am.
planned
There's
future
future
roundabout.
roundabout.
But beyond that, there's not that I'm aware of any discussion or recommendation for widening of Fair Play beyond
Yes,
that.
ma'am. I didn't see anything talking about a widening to Annie P. I wasn't sure if they had discussions outside this forum that taken place, but thank you. Thank you, ladies, for answering those questions. Are there any other questions that the planning commission has of staff or the applicant at this time? If there's no other questions, if there's any concerns or any ideas that you guys would like to discuss at this time, we can go into deliberation.
I have a concern with the traffic coming out on the Willow, because that street is barely big enough for one car to go through, and we're going to have this big roundabout coming out on Willow Drive. You get to the bridge up there, and it's like a bottleneck. So that's one concern I have, and I understand that he's not going to widen the street all the way up to the bridge, but it is a concern for the vehicles coming in and out of there for 275 families. I know they're all not going to come out on that end, but if it's half and half, half of them will. That's one of the concerns.
Yes, sir. Looking at the application, obviously the first phase of development will be funneled through that main entrance at Oak and Willow through that roundabout. That secondary won't be opened up until the second phase. So yes, sir, there could be
Gonna be a
some time
problem.
period that passes that you have a 66 or more lots that would funnel through that one entrance. Any other concerns, questions, comments?
Yes, I have concern because I live right there at the bridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you can, I live right there at the bridge.
Yes, ma'am.
And I sit there day in and day out because I'm tired. Watching tractor trailers and cars coming by. And it's been numerous times that they've hit it, the bridge, because it's so narrow. And to a sense, the road is really narrow. I'm thinking, I thought they was going to widen it or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand right there where you were talking about where you live, being the bridge is narrow, especially anybody trying to turn to go across the bridge to try to get to Cherokee or the bypass.
When
the
people
truck
are
route.
turning, coming down Willow, they'll sit and wait because they can see someone coming up. And once they get so far and they pass them, then they'll go. So that is a concern.
Adele or Barbara, would one of you like to address the concerns regarding the intersection at the bridge?
That is one of the recommendations from the city's engineer review was that there be consideration to widening Willow 2 to 3 feet, not an impact on the adjacent properties, but 2 to 3 feet because it's between the bridge and Oak, because the average pavement width there is 17 to 18 feet.
With that recommendation from the city engineer, is that something that the city has programmed for?
It is not something that the city is currently programmed for. It is something that you could apply as a condition.
Okay.
It is also something that the city could program.
Okay.
Adele, can you repeat that? That last part I didn't hear.
I said it is something you could apply as a condition. It is also something that the city could program as a.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring to know that our city engineer has looked at that and has made a recommendation for that. Has the engineer given any kind of cost estimate on what it would take to widen that section of Willow from Oak to the bridge?
Yeah, the city's engineer who looked at that felt that that was a relatively minimal cost. He felt that that widening could happen without significant drainage or other work, basically. Just widening the existing roadbed within the existing right-of-way.
Okay, so there is adequate enough right-of-way on the north side?
It was a very preliminary review.
Okay.
But he was familiar with that area because we have a water line project going down through there.
Okay. That's good to know, thank you.
So I too have big concerns about that intersection. I had to turn, was on the bridge and had to turn right to come here tonight. And I was behind. Yeah, he was in front of me. And yeah, I can't imagine because the traffic impact study says that once the whole project is completed, there's going to be more than 2,700 cars coming into and out of that subdivision during peak hours per day. And I'm not certain that any of those roads down in there can handle that. I mean, you can put in a roundabout, but I guess what they would refer to as a collection street, to me, seems quite inadequate for that amount of traffic there. I also am not 100% certain, not sure without a concrete plan to widen or reinforce some of those roadways. If a subdivision is built and then we decide to do it, we're way behind the 8 ball. From what I can see on this impact study.
I definitely agree with you. The roundabout is nice to have access to get in to the subdivision and as a traffic controlling device. Also as to slow speeds down in a situation. Minimizes stops via improved intersections. But the road network and the infrastructure that we have in this area, I don't think the volume of traffic that we're talking, I agree with you, I don't think the existing infrastructure can support that. That's good to know that the city engineer has looked at it. But the question is, I mean, that's just a very preliminary review based upon a water line project the city's looking at. With the majority of these lots, like I've mentioned earlier with Mike's concern, will be utilizing this main entrance going to Cherokee via Willow Drive for a while until that secondary entrance is there. I think some may go up Oak, but I think majority will go Willow. I'm just imagining and looking at the traffic impact study, it suggested that as well, because it's the most direct line of travel. That's a concern I have as far as.
Well, that's the easiest way to get to a light.
That's it. It's the easiest place to get to anywhere within town, yeah. So that's a concern I had as well, is the bottleneck. And Valerie, you said it better than I could have said it. If this is not in place concurrently with any development activity on this property, then we're behind. Nobody likes to be reactionary, and I'm not sure. I know I don't have an easy answer with how to address that.
And we're not certain where the right-of-way for the railroad lies on that narrow street, is that correct?
I don't know that answer to that. That's going to be an answer that Adele had to provide.
Is it appropriate if I help possibly with a suggestion?
Sure, we're listening.
To Adele's point, we would be agreeable to committing to ensuring from the bridge to Oak Drive a 20-foot pavement width. So long as we don't have to go and obtain any additional right-of-way, which I think we all know is achievable. So if that was another condition, I think we're contributing to some of the troubled intersections, as mentioned in the previous hearing, and we understand that. I hear the statements on the fact that the roundabout solves some of the problems, but part of the issue is the Willow width. And I think we would prefer to go ahead and settle that as well. And if another condition required us to make sure there's 20-foot minimum width from the bridge to Oak Drive, we would be agreeable to that. And we do believe, just from the traffic study, that second entrance relief will substantially help the situation in Phase 2, but we also recognize that Phase 1 will only have that access, therefore we just need to help create that solution.
We appreciate that. Adele, I apologize for continue to put you on the spot here. Do you know what the current pavement width is in that segment of Willow?
Yeah, according to the city engineer, it was 17 feet.
Okay.
17 to 18 feet, because it's not exactly the same throughout, from the bridge to the intersection with Oak. And it's a current water line project, so it's one they have done survey for.
Okay.
So we have construction plans on, yeah. And we do have also information, and that engineer did the research on the railroad right-of-way through there too. So that is known information.
Okay. So is that, is any part of Willow within the railroad right-of-way?
Yes.
Okay. does the railroad right-of-way extend over Willow onto the north side, closer to the residents?
Yes, the railroad right-of-way includes Willow in some of those areas. So the road and the utilities we have within Willow we have permits with railroad
Okay.
for those installations in operation.
In your experience in the past in dealing with the railroad, how easily have they been to work with on a road widening project when the road is within their right-of-way?
Well, I'll say I haven't done a road widening project, but we've gotten several recent utility permits within the right-of-way and crossings and borings under the track. And, it takes a few months to get those permits, but we do get them.
Okay.
I would say that a parallel installation is easier than a crossing of the railroad, which we've gotten permits for too, borings under the track.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Valerie, did that answer some of your questions about the right-of-way? I know it answered one of mine.
Possibly,
Okay.
yes. It's a lot to process at one time.
I'm a visual person, so as Adele's explained it to me, I'm visualizing the road, the right-of-way of a railroad that extends past it and abuts the residents' property that face the railroad. Are there any questions?
So the widening of Oak would take place on the side that does not have the residences on it?
No, ma'am, it would, on Willow, the widening of Willow.
Willow, I'm sorry.
I would imagine they would widen it to the north, closer to those residents, is what I would imagine within that right-of-way. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of the abutment of the bridge location. It'd be easier to widen that 3 feet to the north versus
Right.
a foot and a half to the south or 3 feet to the south because of the bridge abutment you'll have to contend with for those radius of the turns.
So what sort of notice or agreement would be required from the people that own those houses?
If the right-of-way does not have to be accrued,
Does not.
if there's adequate right-of-way width, then the city or the contractor would not have to, the developer would not have to acquire any additional right-of-way. They would be able to construct it within that footprint.
Right there.
Now, what that does is potentially puts the edge of pavement that much closer to the residents' front doors.
Yeah. Okay.
Something needs to be done because
Sir?
something needs to be done before this thing goes in. I don't have a problem with people building subdivisions. We need housing in the city. But we need to make sure that before it goes in there that we have the adequate street width or whatever maintenance that we have before they start.
Yes, sir. And
My
that's,
opinion.
this is what's difficult
Yeah.
about this particular plan versus one we saw recently, is that I think we all probably support this idea. I can't speak
Yeah.
for everyone, but the infrastructure that is in the area we have to ensure is adequate. So we've got reports that water and sewer are adequate to serve the proposed development. What we don't have, I don't believe, is adequate road network. The developer, the applicant has been generous in accommodating to try to improve our road network, especially with the roads that impact this property.
Right.
And that's unique. I've not seen that before, and to have the applicant stand up tonight and say that they would be willing to work with the city to widen Willow from their property to the bridge to a 20-foot width, to accommodate a 20-foot width, that's pretty bold, and I appreciate that honesty and boldness from him. But the concern is still there. I hate to get behind the 8 ball and and turn around and have 100 homes out there and have a 17-foot wide roadway under construction to go 20 feet wide, when a roadway construction projects can take 9, 10, 12 months. And this is not a big project on the surface. We don't know what it's going to look like when engineering is done, because they're not just going to go out there and start grading tomorrow. So that's some of the concerns I have.
You could condition us to make that widening before the first final plat could be recorded, so that it ensures
Yeah.
the widening's done prior to any home built.
Okay. And that's something you're comfortable with?
Yeah, when I proposed the widening, for me, it's the assumption is it would have been required at the beginning, along with all the improvements of the round, like all the improvements we proposed at the intersection, all in the widening at Willow would have to happen before we would get final plat sign off. Therefore, nothing's built until that's done. Yeah.
I don't know.
Ma'am?
That's,
Yeah, that's reassuring to me. If that's
yes. Very.
Signora?
You see, I remember when they was redoing that bridge,
Yes, ma'am. I do too.
that bridge and the Cherokee Bridge.
Cherokee, yep.
When they did the Cherokee Bridge, everybody had to
Come
come
right by your house.
by my
Yep.
house. And they did that bridge by me, everybody came by my house. And so I don't have a problem with the subdivision. It's just that my road is narrow, my street is narrow, and everybody coming by my house, the dump trucks or whatever y'all gonna use to come, you got to come that way to get up in there to build the houses. That's a lot of traffic.
And I think that's where he said before he's willing to accept the condition that before any final plat is filed and finalized and approved, meaning before any homes can be built, that segment of road will be widened. While, yes, ma'am, trucks are still gonna come there, the road will be a little bit wider. And obviously that benefits his grading contractors who are gonna come in to do the grading of the subdivision. If they come down and they'll have to come through that way and turn right, that would benefit them as well for their turning radius, but you're gonna get more traffic, yes, ma'am. And that's just, I guess, part of our small town growing up. Jay? Any comments, questions, concerns?
I think I'm good.
Adolphus?
Nope, I'm good.
Valerie?
I think that condition has to be in there
Agreed.
Okay.
before we would accept a plat.
Just to be clear, what were the additional conditions that we've talked about tonight?
Well,
So aside from the road,
well, I would look at, if the motion would be made to approve, it would be a motion to approve the sketch plat as presented. Subjected to the city council approving the rezoning, and condition the sketch plat, because we can't go back and add conditions of zoning. We're not here to talk about the zoning. But you can condition the sketch plat to require widening from Willow, or widening of Willow from Oak to the railroad bridge, an additional to 20-foot wide pavement width, to be completed prior to phase 1 final plat.
that's what I thought. I just want to make sure I didn't miss one that we had set out there. That's all.
Gotcha. So Valerie, are you address some of your concerns, your apprehensions?
It does, yes.
Okay.
I think, yes. Yes is the short answer.
It's definitely difficult.
Yeah. That's
Mike?
hard, that's a lot of houses, a lot of vehicles, a lot of development in that area. And that's an older area, and I'm not 100% sure that the infrastructure on other roads is adequate either, but Willow is partially because I live across from that, but it is the biggest concern for me.
Understandable. And I agree with you, the infrastructure is older, it's a more established area. And, yeah, the city will have to program and prepare for resurfacing of streets when they start getting more heavy construction traffic coming through that area. Mike? Well, at this time, if there's no-
I'm good with what he said.
Okay.
He didn't have to do that. And my concern was if it was left up to, the city would have to get bids, and it takes time. If they started that particular area there before the city could get the road widened, then I'd have a problem, because I live with the side of the bridge, and I see it every day. And when your industry starts getting off it, East Hightower coming up to the bridge, and we've got all these other vehicles coming in and out of there, it can be harrowing at times. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, and during, the biggest concern is, during peak hours, there are accessibility from neighborhoods to schools, and there'll be buses and, because it has to be wide enough and accessible enough for school buses, as well as other cars, too. A neighborhood of that size is going to have a significant number of children in it, which is a whole separate concern. But that's not as much on the forefront right now. So, we could motion to put that condition in for the widening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That would definitely be something that I would suggest, is that if there's a motion to approve, then that would be a condition upon that approval.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to make a motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to motion that we approve the sketch plat with the condition, if the city approves his rezoning, with the condition that the developer be responsible for the widening of Willow between the bridge and Oak Street to at least 20 feet
Prior to the first,
prior to
final
any
plat.
development.
Yes.
And prior to the final sketch plat approval.
okay. So the motion on the table is to approve the sketch plat as proposed, conditioned to the approval of rezoning by city council and the widening of Willow Drive from Oak Street to the bridge to at least 20 foot wide, to be done prior to the recording of Phase 1 final plat. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there a second?
I second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to amend the subdivision ordinance for the mandatory access points for new subdivisions. Barbara, would you like to introduce this item for us, please?
Yes, Chairman. You have an amendment before you to amend the subdivision ordinance to provide a mandatory access points for new subdivisions. This will provide to repealing conflicting ordinances to provide an effective date and for other purposes. In this section below at the 4.3 subsection, this would minimum access points. All new subdivision development shall have access to a collector street. The number of access points shall be as follows. Subdivision with up to 30 lots shall have at least one access point. Subdivisions with 31 to 200 lots shall have at least 2 access points. Subdivision with 200 or more lots shall have at least 3 access points. Interconnectively of adjacent properties, all subdivisions must provide stub connections to adjacent subdivisions to enable an integrated road network. If the adjacent property is undeveloped and the street must temporarily be dead-end street, the right-of-way shall be extended to the property line. A temporary T or L-shaped turnabout shall be provided on all temporary dead-end streets with a notation on the subdivision plat that land outside the normal street right-of-way shall convert to abutters whenever the street is continued. The mayor and council may limit the length of temporary dead-end streets in accordance with the design standards of this ordinance. The exceptions to be subsections shall only be allowed in conditions where it would be impossible or impractical for the property owner to comply with this regulation. It will be in the discretion of the mayor and council to grant such exception. The preamble of this ordinance shall be considered to be and is hereby incorporated by the reference and is fully set forth herein. This application is actually setting forth in our subdivision ordinance so that the streets with subdivisions being developed, that they have more than one access point in and out of the
Yes, ma'am.
same.
And I did see in the synopsis that was sent out that the fire chief and the police chief have weighed in on this. The fire chief did some research on other jurisdictions, and this language is very consistent with what the development guidelines are and regulations are in neighboring and nearby jurisdictions.
Yes, sir. The fire chief did do some research on that. He did include a letter of reference to other cities, Newton County, City of Covington, the City of Loganville. They all have pretty much these same standards.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just, we'd like to add this to our ordinance too.
Are there any questions of Barbara regarding this proposed text amendment? At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. If there's anyone who would like to speak in favor of this proposed text amendment, please approach the microphone. If there's anyone who would like to oppose the proposed text amendment, please approach the microphone. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Seems to me pretty simple. It's a sliding scale requiring number of access points. Any questions, concerns, comments that the Planning Commission has? Okay. Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to accept the amendment to the ordinance for the subdivisions,
Okay. so
access points.
We have a motion to recommend to the mayor and council to approve the text amendment as presented by staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, like sign. Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We have no items under old business. New business, we have the housing strategy for comprehensive plan, and Ms. Dale sent out some detailed information regarding the city's GIC application and involvement within the GIC program. Dale, would you like to
Sure.
introduce this?
Yes, thank you. This is a request from the GIC stakeholders group based to provide leadership for the development of an updated housing strategy. And I put in your packet some background. The Georgia Initiative for Community Housing is a state program that communities apply to be a part of. And it's basically a program where a grassroots stakeholder group from a community develops what they perceive their housing needs to be in the community, and this state program assists in developing a strategic plan and bringing resources to the table to help address those needs. We're in the second of our 3-year program, and we go to a retreat, or in this year, the retreat came to us, every 6 months, where we share progress with the other communities in the program and get education on resources and strategies or lessons learned from other communities. And there are, we learn about access to grants and things like that to help meet our housing needs. One issue some of the issues that we have addressed are working through neighborhood cleanups and strengthening our improvement of neighborhoods by providing resources to them, or code enforcement. We've done some statistics research to get past the perceptions of what our needs are to look at, what the actual facts are relative to housing affordability in the city. But what we have not made a lot of headway on is the provision of additional housing, and that was really the top goal from this grassroots stakeholders group when we started this, is that there was a shortage of housing at really all price points in Social Circle. So what we are asking for leadership from the Planning Commission is to be the host for some, and to help us develop some public input strategies, and then guide the development of a consensus housing strategy that would become an amendment to the comprehensive plan. We have found with our grant applications for housing improvements that we need to be sure, we need to be able to demonstrate that the support we're seeking to provide resources to our residents for housing is supported by the community's comprehensive plan. And right now, I think we've got some gaps in that.
Has everyone had an opportunity to look over the information that Adele sent to us? Okay. You would like to, you have any comments on that, Mike? You have any comments on that?
Well, from what I've seen for the first quarter of what I got into, it looked like a good idea. I mean, as I understand it, we're thinking about facilitating the meetings or
Correct.
to get, I like that idea.
Well, I think one of our goals, or one of the goals set out by the GIC team, is slowly coming to fruition, and that is to attract housing. We have an applicant that's looking to build a development that will construct 275 houses. We have the sketch plan on Memorial, and not looking too far ahead in the future. I think we have some other things coming at us in some future agendas that include additional housing. I'm going to say this, that I think there's some fundamental errors, in my opinion, of the objective of the state-wide GIC program. But I'm not going to let that cloud my judgment of what we're trying to do. In order for us as a city to grow and to continue to be a destination location for families, we've got to stick to our identity and continue to attract the people who want to be here, because the people who want to be here are going to be people like us that get involved. And we all came to Social Circle for a reason. Either we were born here or came here for one reason or another. And that's something that we need to keep in mind as other people want to come here. Social Circle today is different than it was yesterday, and it will be even more different tomorrow. But I think we're getting there. I look at some of the revitalization efforts that are going on in neighboring cities. I looked at Monroe's downtown and seeing how they've been able to really make a positive impact, but a lot of that was not government programs or I don't want to make it sound like a nanny state, but that was because the market was right.
Right.
And the market demand was there. And I think what we're seeing with housing, in order to attract the retail destinations that we want to see either on the outskirts of town or in downtown, we've got to have rooftops, because rooftops is what drives commercial. In addition to that, we have to have jobs, and we have a good industrial base here in town that provides careers. So with that said, Adele, just thinking forward, I think we're on that path. One thing that I don't necessarily agree with GIC is that the affordable housing method, no one said affordable housing has to be new housing. One thing that I would like to see is more opportunities for housing assistance as far as either through nonprofits or through the grant programs through GIC, programs to help individuals who are in homes that are aging to become more weatherproof or become more sustainable, not to move them out to something else or something new, but people don't always want to leave their house. They just probably need some help making it weatherproof, insulating, things like that. So I'm not going to get on my soapbox on that if anybody else has any comments.
I will just say that's exactly the kind of the input that I think we need to make captured in our comprehensive plan and in our strategy. So,
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I would agree with Scott. I think we have tremendous opportunity for revitalization here. There are a lot of really cool old houses, older houses. And I would caution against growth just for the sake of saying we have growth. I am from originally a city that is experiencing insane growth. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and they say about 3,000 people are moving there a day, and I cannot tell you what a mess that city is right now. They're throwing up apartments and condos and homes as fast as they can, and in 20 years, their neighborhoods are not going to have any character, and they're not going to be what they want them to be. I think if we concentrate on what's here, revitalize, attract, clean up, community incentives, I think that is where we need to concentrate.
Well, and in reading through it, you talk about the blight kind of areas that are there. We look at it as a blight, and you hear that word, and you think, oh, this just needs to be torn down. But that's not necessarily the case. Kind of what you're getting to is the homeowner. Some of those are people that are renting them out, and so the tenant has no incentive to want to clean it up because it's not their responsibility, so to speak. But giving incentives to the landlords or the homeowners of those properties to say, look, this doesn't have to be this way, and make it a better place for, instead of it just being a black hole, where nothing good ever comes out of it because everyone sees those houses as run down, dilapidated. I think that, I don't know if maybe, having blight tax is necessarily the answer for it. It's an option, but I think, some sort of an incentive that allows for a property owner to say, what, it's worth it to me to make this a better thing for the community as a whole, because obviously you don't want to drive down a road and see 5 or 6 rundown houses that are beautiful houses that have been there forever, because we've had some recent stuff in town that have been renovated. They go in and they gutted it and renovated it, and it's beautiful. It just needed a little TLC. So and I think the private investment, as far as rooftops, bringing in money for commercial stuff, that private investment, that buy-in principle is kind of what we need to be focused on, as well as just new developments, such as what the Pacific Group is trying to bring in.
Okay. Any other?
But I agree with both points.
Any other concerns, comments, ideas, suggestions for the GIC team? Adele? Thank you.
thank you. Helpful in what we'd like to do. If the Planning Commission has suggestions on public input forums, whether it be online surveys or whatever, If you could channel them to Barbara, and then we'll try to bring back to you, maybe a structure of getting that input and having some time for you all to talk about the input and continue to provide us this kind of guidance. That's very helpful.
Thank you. At this time, we have no other items on the agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.